All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for defying the pandemic and coming to Tafseerah. What was that?
It feels like I'm at the wrong location.
You know, most people are frightened. They just want to stay safe. All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I ask Allah to extend His blessings to the Prophet's family and descendants, to his companions and followers, and the men and women that walk in the footsteps. Okay, can we lower the volume a little bit? And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make each and every one among them. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah khairan for joining us for another session of the Tafseerah program. Tonight, inshallah, we will cover Surah al-Jathiyah. It has been an incredible journey in year 11, particularly year 11, since it's 11 years now since the Prophet ﷺ encountered Jibreel for the first time and received the ayat of Surah Al-Alaq in the Quran. And so in the Tafseerah program, this is what we study. We study the surahs of the Quran in the order of their revelation. And as we study the surahs, we also study the context of the events of the seerah to tell us basically the purpose, the theme, the essence of every surah. So it's both tafsir and seerah, and that's why we call it the Tafseerah program. I said before that year 11 was a unique year in the sense that it's a year and a half now before Hijrah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to prepare the believers, He wants to prepare the community of the Muslims that is about to migrate to Medina for the monumental responsibilities that they are about to carry. From, as I said before, from being herders of sheep, they are about to become leaders of nations. The hearts need to be massaged and the minds need to be educated so that the Muslims are able to assume their new responsibility. And we have two surahs left, inshallah, in the Hawamim. We call them the Hawamim because it's plural of Hamim. All these surahs start with the disjointed letters Ha and Mim. So we have two surahs left, inshallah, Surah Al-Ahqaf, and tonight's surah is Surah Al-Jathiyah. And we said before that all these surahs basically have a lot of commonalities. They have similar qualities to them. They all start with Hamim, and every surah at the very beginning after Hamim, it honors the Quran, it speaks about the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In their order of revelation is the same as their order of collection, so they sort of like occupy the juz between 23 and 26 in the Quran. They're all medium-sized surahs, and they also make mention of Bani Israel, of the Hebrews, and Musa alayhi salam. And as I said before, they prepare the Muslims, for the migration to Medina to establish a new polity. The surahs that we've covered so far are Surah Fussilat. And Surah Fussilat basically speaks about the spiritual leadership of the world being transferred now to the Muslims. So the mantle, the baton of that spiritual leadership is now moving to the Muslims. And I said before that it is very likely that Isra and Mi'raj happened right around the time Surah Fussilat was revealed, either right before or right after the surah, according to my own research. Followed by Surah Al-Shura. Shura means, consultation, which was revealed in order to help the Muslims learn how to resolve power struggles. So as you move into a new community, as you become a leader, as you assume power, that will basically become a coveted item, and people will naturally compete for power And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah Al-Shura in order to help the Muslims, early Muslims and us today as well, how to resolve power struggles. And Surah Al-Zukhruf was revealed in order to help the Muslims learn how to handle the challenges of material prosperity. When you become very wealthy, when you've acquired lots and lots of dunya, how do you make sure that it does not get under your skin and corrupt your heart? And then Surah Al-Dukhan, the smoke, we've talked about it last time, teaches the Muslims how to establish that being secure in the land, the Arabic word that we used is tamkeen, is an illusion. It's not real. You think that you've been established in the land, you think that you've been secured in the land, everything is yours. The reign, the power, the establishment is not going to go away. It's unstoppable, to only realize that it still declines and fades from memory like every other civilization. So in this order, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepares the believers for the migration, for hijrah, for the acquisition of power. So it starts with this. You will take up the mantle of spiritual leadership. You will carry the baton. Be ready for this. Don't shy away from the responsibility. Don't say, give it to somebody else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to lead the world spiritually. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Surah Fussilat says, I want you to be prepared for this, and I want you to accept the honor. Okay? Followed by that, there will likely be power struggles. So use shura in order to resolve your power struggles. But if you somehow manage to resolve power struggles, material prosperity has a tendency to corrupt the hearts of men. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, now that you've overcome the struggles of power, you need to overcome the tendencies of the heart to settle for the material prosperity of this dunya. Do not let it become your goal. I have to give it to you because it's going to help you lead and it's going to help you change. You need the government, and you need government resources, and you need military power in order to achieve the mission of the government. But don't ever allow the zukhruf of this dunya to corrupt your heart and to distract you from your mission, right? And if you somehow overcome both, if you overcome the allure of power that leads people to power struggles, and if you somehow manage to overcome the allure of dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells you that there is one last step that you have to be worried about, right? And that one last step that you need to be concerned about is, again, to assume that you have been granted mastery over the land. To assume that that somehow you've been granted that power over subjects, and that you can somehow tell people what to do and control nations and populations, and think that you have the absolute upper hand, and then that situation is not going to change. This illusion of tamkeen, of being securely established in the land, is but smoke. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us about that in Surah Al-Dukhan. As you can see, if we assume that the evil of power and control, because power has its own benefits. You're able to lead, you're able to guide, you're able to defend values, right? But it comes with its own evils as well, right? Power struggles, disunity, civil war, zukhruf, all these other. So if you assume that the evils of power is an octopus, in the last 3 surahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cut the tentacles of the octopus, right? Its little arms. They have been severed, okay? So what remains now? What remains is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reveal a surah that will do what? That will smack the head of the octopus, right? Because tentacles may grow back. So yes, we need to cut the tentacles, but we have to make sure that the source of the problem is resolved. So the question becomes, as we examine the next surah, as we look at the upcoming chapter of that was revealed in year 11, we have to ask ourselves this question, logically speaking. Okay, if the surahs so far have managed to help us overcome, the evil of power struggle, have helped us overcome to manage to overcome the evil of material prosperity, and it has helped us manage to overcome the illusion of being securely established in the land. We have to ask ourselves, these are tentacles of evil. Then what is the human emotion? What is the disease of the heart, so to speak, that leads to all of these things? What is the one illness of the heart? And this is what we're going to examine in Surah al-Jathiyah, right? What is the one illness of the heart or disease of the heart that leads to power struggles, that leads to the acquisition, the blind acquisition, the unfettered acquisition of material prosperity, and leads to a sense of self-possession, and leads to a sense of invincibility. I will be here forever. Tamkeen, as I said last time. What is the one disease of the heart that leads to all of these things? What is it? Anyone wants to guess?
Greed?
Greed may explain the attempt to acquire material gain, but greed may not necessarily be the best explanation for power struggles. Pride and arrogance, right? Pride and arrogance. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the last 3 surahs is teaching the small Muslim community that is about to migrate to the city of Medina now, and He's telling them in due time you will acquire tremendous power. You will be given power that your ancestors would marvel at, right? Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, this simple cousin of the Prophet who used to go to the desert, with his bow. He was a great archer, so he should go hunting, in his idle time. Otherwise, he was just a very simple guy. One day became a military general that conquered Persia, and he became the governor of Iraq. I mean, it's so incredible. Like the simplest man, only 10 years later, they became these great leaders that are changing the world completely. They're taking on the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and they're taking on the Persian Empire. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying again, there is a disease of the heart that leads to all these other tentacles. And let's cut the tentacles first, right? So, there is power struggle. Surah al-Shura is going to fix that. There is, to be deluded by material prosperity. Surah al-Zukhruf fixes that. And then there is the idea of tamkeen, to feel that you've been securely established in the land. My reign will last forever, kind of thing. Muslim or kafir, right? It doesn't matter. The assumption that your reign will last forever was addressed in Surah al-Dukhan. Come on, man, it's all smoke. It's all an illusion. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tackles this source of all of these evil consequences, and that source is kibr in the hearts. That source is arrogance. Surah al-Jathiyah talks about arrogance, but it doesn't talk about arrogance as we've seen in other surahs in the Quran that have briefly addressed arrogance. It doesn't talk about it in a detailed academic sense. It talks about only to the extent that it helps us overcome the evils of power, and it helps us overcome the evils of establishment, and it helps us overcome the evils of success. And while this was relevant to a Muslim community that is about to rule half of the world, it is still relevant for us today, right? Because one day you are unemployed and you're struggling and you don't have much, and then 10 years later you own a company and then you employ 150 people. It's the same thing. You have to ask yourself, will I spend all of my time competing with my partners? 3 people came together and they established a company, and then it becomes competition for power. Who gets to dictate and who gets to decide and who gets to steer the company? Surah al-Shura can help you with that, right? And then the idea that from poverty to extreme wealth and you have all these millions of dollars, will you allow it to corrupt your heart? Or will you make sure that you use that wealth for the right reasons and give the due haqq, as I said before, what is rightly owed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of your wealth, and use it, to do good and spend it on good and righteous things, and use your wealth to help your community become a better community. That is the test of Zukhruf, right? The Surah al-Zukhruf addresses. And then to assume that somehow your company is going to last forever. I have no competition. Right? I am powerful, I'm strong. I keep thinking, these days about Amazon and the power that Amazon has achieved. To the extent that I'm now putting conscious effort to find Amazon alternatives. So I'm trying to buy from like Overstock, and I'm trying to buy from some of the, from eBay or some of the other online, avenues. Why? It's not necessarily because, I'm the good old, postmodern, super liberal activist who's fighting, the evil empire of Amazon. It's actually a lot simpler than that. I think that Amazon, just like any other entity in the world, will eventually collapse. It will eventually crash. And I don't want to be so dependent on something. I mean, we've become dependent on it for everything. It's incredible the amount of stuff that people buy from Amazon right now. Their food, their groceries, their meat, their soda, their computers, their everything that you need every single day. You just go to Amazon. They've built such a reliable model. But with that reliability comes feelings of invincibility. They think they're invincible. Right? And if you've established a business, if you've established a company, if you've done something great for yourself, you will naturally think that you've become invincible. You will naturally have a sense of tamkeen. I mean, who's going to unseat me from this thing? I have all this money sitting in the bank. I have great financial advisors. My CPA is an insane Russian dude that finds all the little loopholes of the law. Right? Who can take this away from me? Right? Again, Surah Al-Dukhan teaches you that all of that is just smoke, man. It's all just an illusion. Nothing stays forever. All right. So as much as the conversations in the Hawamim are relevant, for the Muslims at that time when they were about to establish a new polity, that continues to be relevant for us. Even as individuals, but it's also like I said last time, it's also relevant for us as a community, right? Look at where we were a few years ago and where we are today and where we can possibly be, 5 or 10 years from today. Are we immune from power struggles? Half of the masajid in the United States collapsed or became dysfunctional because of power struggles. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Are we immune from raising so much money and thinking that we've become so powerful and we start using this money in inappropriate ways, or not necessarily illegal ways, but ways that are not in line with the ethical teachings of Islam? Is very possible, right? Are we immune from thinking that we're going to last forever? We're not immune from any of that. The Quran has to keep you aware and reminded of the diseases of the hearts and the illnesses, that the core of all of this is kibr. The core of all of this is hubris, is arrogance, is to think that you're better, smarter, more powerful, stronger than everybody else, right? That is the key, and that is what Surah al-Jathiyah is trying to teach us, in tonight's conversation. And I want to share with you some of the prophetic perspectives, some of what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said about arrogance. لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من كبر. He or she who has or possesses an ounce weight, an atom's weight of arrogance in their hearts will not enter paradise. What a statement. What a statement. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not saying a little bit. He's saying that you cannot have it in your heart, period. And I've always wondered about that. Why is arrogance so abhorred? Why is arrogance so resented in Islam? Why is there emphasis on humility? Okay, it's not emphasis on timidity. You have to understand. You're not supposed to cower and turn your left cheek. Okay, but it is an emphasis on humility. And I kept looking at it, and then I came across another hadith. It's hadith Qudsi in the Sunan of Imam Abu Dawood, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these are the words of God, right? He says, Al-kibriya'u ridai, wal-'azamatu izari. He said that grandeur is my cloak and hubris is my garment. Who says this? God. I know that the word grandeur and hubris, they have negative connotations because of what they can do in the human community. But is God justified to feel that he's better than everyone else or not?
Yes.
Suddenly, arrogance doesn't sound so bad if it comes from
Allah.
the Creator. But arrogance sounds so horrendous when it comes from us. Why? Why? Shouldn't God lead by example and be humble like us? If he wants us to be humble, shouldn't he be humble? Why are we expected to be humble? Because we are not better than anybody else, no matter what. Why is God not expected to be humble?
There's not.
Because he is better than everybody else. It's very simple. That's just the reality. I mean, he created things. You cannot assume that you and the thing you created are on a level field. You know, if I'm a human being and I created a laptop, does that make me and the laptop on the same level? No. I can comfortably say I am better than the laptop. It would not be an arrogant statement, or at least it would be justified arrogance. And so, but I cannot say I am better than my fellow human being, because race or wealth or education or employment, none of that constitutes legitimate criteria to consider yourself better than any other human being. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 100% justified to say, I'm better than you. Of course, I'm God. Okay? So he says, Al-Kibriya'u ridai. Grandeur is my cloak, figuratively. وَالْعَظَمَةُ إِزَارِي. And hubris is my garment. فَمَنْ نَازَعَنِي فِيهِمَا قَذَفْتُهُ فِي النَّارِ. Whoever vies with me in those two matters, I will throw that person in hellfire, because I can't. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets very angry when people are arrogant, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assumes that he is the only one that could be justified to say I'm better than everybody else, whereas man has absolutely no justification to make such statements. You are a small dust speck in God's universe. He allows you to breathe, he allows you to eat, he allows you to drink. You know, if you have urinary retention, you know, I took my son to the emergency room a couple of years ago, and there was this guy in his mid-40s who was screaming like a little girl, like I thought that, you know, his liver ruptured or something, and he's screaming his lungs out because he could not go to the bathroom. He had an acute urinary retention, and they have to take him inside and insert a catheter in order to empty his bladder. I mean, the simplest thing. You know, the ability to go to the bathroom. You think yourself better than other human beings? You know, the wealthiest and the poorest on this earth, they still need to eat. They still need to go to the bathroom. And if they don't take showers for a couple of days, they're going to smell horrendous. It doesn't matter what kind of wealth you are. And that's why hubris, arrogance, is such a hated thing by God, right? Here's another hadith that I also found to be, you know, impactful. Tahajjat al-jannatu wan-nar. Heaven and hell argued. Okay? فَقَالَتِ النَّارُ أُوثِرْتُ بِالْمُتَكَبِّرِينَ. Hellfire said, you know, God uses me to punish the arrogant. وَقَالَتِ الْجَنَّةُ أُوثِرْتُ بِالْمَسَاكِينَ. God made me the place in which the simple, humble is rewarded. Right? فقال الله عز وجل للجنة أنت رحمتي أرحم بك من أشاء. You are my mercy, and I use you to dispense my mercy upon whomever I will. And then he said to hellfire, وأنت عذابي أعذب بك من أشاء. And you are my punishment, and I inflict you upon whoever I will. Right? So of all the examples of evil behavior, right? Hellfire says that particularly the arrogant class of people, you know, they come to me. I'll take care of them. All right? Why is it that Satan refused to bow to Adam, alayhi salam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to? Exactly, because he was arrogant. What did he say? He said to God, he was, I think, the first racist in human history. He said to God, right, you know, خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتُهُ مِن طِينٍ. Lord, you created me from fire, and you created Adam from from the clay of the earth. In other words, he was saying, I am better. I am made of fire. That means I am better than man, because man is made of substance that is inferior to fire. Who are you to decide? Who gets to decide who's better than who except God? And he's the one that commanded you to bow to Adam alayhi salam. And the consequences of arrogance are absolutely devastating. In Surah Al-A'raf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَأَصْرِفُ عَنْ آيَاتِي الَّذِينَ يَتَكَبَّرُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. He says, I will distract the hearts of the arrogant from my signs so that they become blinded to them. So God will misguide and lead astray people who demonstrate the signs of arrogance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect each and every one of us and protect our hearts along that. With that in mind, then we realize that at this juncture, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals a surah again to shield the hearts of the believers before the impending migration. With about all, from all the evils of power and the evils of tamkeen, right, to be securely established in the land, by revealing a surah that focuses on the idea of arrogance, right? And the surah starts, inshallah, if you guys want to take a look at your Qur'ans, or if you have the app on your phones, the surah starts as we expect it with Hamim, right? And then the second ayat, Tanzilul Kitab min Allah, again, a reverence of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, as we've seen in all of the Hameems so far, there's always that, veneration of the scriptures that comes right after. And then God demonstrates in the upcoming 3 or 4 ayat, particularly from 3 to 6, he demonstrates the absolute magnanimous diversity of his creation. And he talks about heavens, and he talks about the earth, he talks about the universe, he talks about the creation of man, he talks about the alternation of night and day, he talks about the rain that comes from the clouds, he talks about the wind, all things that man cannot control. In order to say, hey, I've done all these things, what have you done? What gives you the illusion that you can be arrogant, right? But then I want you to pay attention to ayah number 7. Ayah number 7 is really, really important. And this is an important station here, because what Surah al-Jathiyah does is that it shows us multiple groups of people who have become arrogant and why. Because arrogance is nuanced. Arrogance has multiple manifestations and has multiple reasons. All right, so it's important to understand the details of that as well. The first category of people here, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ أَفَّاكٍ أَثِيمٍ. Woe unto every sinful self-deceiver. Wail, some of the scholars say that it's a valley in hellfire. And some people say that, this is just a Quranic curse word. Woe unto you. Curse unto you, something like this. Wailun likulli affakin athim. For everyone that is affak, that person, ifk is, athim is a sinner. But what is affak? Affak from ifk. What is ifk?
Lying.
Exactly. Ifk is to lie in Arabic. Ifk is lying. So affak is the liar. Imam al-Jawhari says in his commentary on this ayah, he says that in the context of Surah al-Jathiyah, a surah that talks about arrogance, it would make more sense if affak here means that person lies to himself. Exactly. It's self-deception. It is self-deception. That's why it comes before athim. They have made that sin, committed that sin before they've committed any other sin. Okay, Lord, what is it that person did? Tell us more. Ayah number 8. يَسْمَعُ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ ثُمَّ يُصِرُّ مُسْتَكْبِرًا. That person could hear the verses of God being recited in the scriptures. That person could see the signs of God in the universe, right? And that, so many people, they have a preconceived idea of themselves and the world, right? And when you are presented with the truth, what are you supposed to do?
Acknowledge it.
First you have to acknowledge it, and second you have to follow it. Some people do neither, basically. They don't want to acknowledge it and they don't want to follow it. Some people acknowledge it, but they refuse to follow it, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a particular group of people, and that group of people, they have their own preconceived notions about the world, about God, whatever it is, about the universe. And then when presented with the truth, they turn their faces in absolute arrogance and they say, I'm not going to listen to this. Why? Because it hurts their ego to surrender and to say, oh man, you're right. I was actually wrong. Thank you for helping me see it the right way, or helping me understand. If your desire is to pursue the truth, you will always surrender when that truth is presented to you. But if your desire is to win arguments and to appear to be better and superior to better than and superior to others, then you will not yield when the truth is presented to you. يسمع آيات الله تتلى عليه ثم يصر مستكبرا كأن لم يسمعها. They are exposed to the signs of God, but when they actually see those signs and hear them, they insist on their original opinions as if they have heard nothing. So it seems like they don't acknowledge and they don't follow, this particular group of people. فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Give them the tidings of a torment most severe. All right? I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. And then after ayah number 8, God basically continues, so he discussed with you his magnanimous signs in the universe. And then he talks about this first group of people and why they get arrogant. And then he continues talking about more magnanimous signs of the universe, right? And we see that in ayah number 12. الله الذي سخر لكم البحر لتجري الفلك فيه بأمره. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that has subdued, gave you control over the oceans so that you can build ships, and those ships float on the surface of those oceans. I have commanded the oceans, I have created the laws of physics in such way that it allows your devices to float, your boats and ships to float. Again, see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing? He's bragging. He's bragging about himself and his own creation. When we brag with each other, it's kind of like looked down upon. But when God brags, he's God.
It's the description of the signs of Allah, and that is the power of Allah.
But he's talking to us right here in order to tell us, what are you arrogant about? See what I've done. What have you done? You're just here consuming my resources. Everything that you consider to be yours is actually something that I've provided you, right? And so again, arrogance, hubris, grandeur, bragging, all of these words are bad if we practice them with each other, but they make perfect sense when they come from the Creator. All right? وَسَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِّنْهُ. Everything in the heavens and everything on earth, I have given you access to. So wait, when God says, I have given you access to everything that is in earth, you will be able to explore oil and raw material and stuff like that from the earth. We can understand that. But why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, I have given you access to subdue the skies as well? What does that mean?
He's empowering.
One of these surahs in the Quran that I think, and I've talked about this before when we covered Surah Al-Rahman, one of those surahs in the Quran that perhaps makes predictions about the future. I think that the simple Bedouin Arabs, 1400 years ago, would have never understood what it means to subdue the skies. Today, you just go to one of those, flight apps, and you see the tremendous amount of this mesh of jets, all the flights all over the globe, absolutely incredible, and how it's all computerized, and they have different levels and they maintain a certain distance. And when was the last time you heard of two 747 jets crashing? Never happens, right? They crash when they land, they crash when they take off, but they never crash with each other, in air. Why? Because the laws of physics have been given to us, and we're just using that. We did not make the laws of physics as they are. We just discovered them and we started using them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically, again, making an allusion, a simple allusion here to truths that are yet to be discovered. All right. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directs His admonitions and castigations primarily to the people of Quraysh, because those are the people in Mecca that the Prophet ﷺ and the early Muslim community are dealing with, trying to, on the one hand, help the Muslims avoid developing any arrogance as they move into Medina, but also highlighting the arrogance of the people of Mecca in their response to the Quran, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs the Muslims not to treat the arrogant with arrogance. Because that's the one thing that we always use. If someone cusses at me, okay, so we keep telling people, cussing is wrong. You cannot use profanity as a Muslim. You cannot use profanity, right? Oh, he started it. That's always the excuse, right? Or your kid, when your kid comes from school and they have like a C-, what's the one thing that they're going to say to justify the C-?
Everybody got C.
Exactly. They'll say everybody else got a C. And my response is always, why is that relevant? I'm sorry, I'm not following your point. Everybody else got a C. So we always, why did you punch this kid in the face? Well, he punched me in the face. Why did you take something that is not yours? Well, he took something that is not mine. I would lead a group of people, every 2 years we go to Umrah. And so when you go to the Haram in Mecca, sometimes people leave their little slippers on the shoe racks outside. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Horrendous idea. All right. So you always want to keep your slippers with you. You put them in like a little plastic bag or something and take them with you. And then there's so many shoe racks inside. So when you pray somewhere, put it like somewhere where you can see. No one steals over there. But there is like literally a million pairs of slippers that all look the same. And so when people are leaving, some people just grab whatever, just take it away. Remember that happened to us. And so one of the brothers, he could not find his slippers. So what is the first thing that he said? He wanted to grab somebody else's slippers. I was like, man, you can't do that. This is Mecca. When you're here performing Umrah, you can't do. Remember that? Remember that incident? Brother Tara was there. And so I was like, you can't do that. He's like, well, but somebody else took my slippers. It's the same thing. You assume that because an offense was committed against you, that justifies committing an offense against somebody else or against that person in particular. Now, I always say to my kids, you have to defend yourself. If someone poses physical harm to you, you have to make sure that person does not hurt you, even if you use physical violence, right? Now, some of you parents may consider that to be a little extreme, but that's my philosophy. You don't initiate fights. You never respond to a bad word with a bad word, sticks and stones kind of thing, right? But if someone will hurt you physically, you have to protect yourself, all right? And so as Muslims, we're not supposed to be, simplistic, and we're not supposed to be pacifist and allow people to trample all over us, but we don't initiate any fights. We don't try to hurt anyone, but we will defend ourselves if we have to, right? Those are two different things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here in ayah number 14, you will experience many people that will treat you arrogantly, but you cannot treat them arrogantly, all right? And we see that again in ayah number 14. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَغْفِرُوا لِلَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ أَيَّامَ اللَّهِ. Tell the believers that they should forgive those who do not believe in the coming of the last day. Ayyamullah is a really interesting word. What does it mean literally?
The days of Allah.
The days of God, right? Ayyam is plural of Yawm, and Yawm is day. And so this should be translated as, say to the believers that they must forgive those who do not recognize the days of God. But then it would not make any sense. What are the days of God? So if you actually trace, pre-Islamic Arabic, the word ayyam was meant as days, but it was also meant as like life-changing events. So they would say ayyam al-Arab in reference to a series of intertribal wars that took place in about 40 years before Islam. Right? And so when we say ayyam something or yawm something, sometimes in the Arabic language before Islam, it was used to reference huge days of consequence, massive events that took place. So in the history of all of humanity, from the time of Adam until the time of the last man, what is the one day that is of the absolute, the one event that is of the absolute most importance? Exactly. It's Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's the day of judgment. And so when it says Ayyamullah, many of the scholars have argued that Ayyamullah, or the days of God here, is just an exaggeration, a figure of speech for the day of judgment, for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing the believers, to the Muslims. One day you will have the upper hand. One day you will have strength. And you will deal with a lot of people with hubris, a lot of people with arrogance. Do not return the arrogance. Do not reciprocate. You cannot do that. You defend yourself. Because again, think about it. We've seen conquerors, across history who have gone and I was actually reading recently how Genghis Khan, when he entered the city of Bukhara, he was not interested in pillaging the city. He was only interested in, he actually sent a letter to the what was his name, the Khwarizmi Sultan. His name was Ahmad Shah, and he sent him the Sultan. He sent him a letter. He said, I own half of this earth, and I'm not interested in war anymore. I am interested in friendship. I'm interested in trade. I want to do business with you guys. So what happens is that the governor of Samarkand, which was one of the cities of the Khwarizmi nation, he intercepted the delegation of Genghis Khan that had lots of gifts and lots of scholars and lots of slaves and all kinds of things. He intercepted the entire caravan and he executed everyone in order to force the hand of the Sultan of Khwarizm to stand up against the Mongols and to not make diplomatic relations with them. So he put the Sultan on the spot. Now the Sultan basically had one of two choices. It's either he humiliates himself with other Muslim leaders and governors, and basically insist on making relations with Genghis Khan, or make a show of strength and pride and tell Genghis Khan that I'm not interested, because Genghis Khan told him, punish the governor of Samarkand and I'm going to let it go. And he said, no, he did exactly what I wanted to do. And subhanAllah, historians actually say that it was on that day that Genghis Khan decided that he needs to subdue the Muslim world. And I'm not suggesting that somehow this could have been averted. I'm just saying you have a conqueror who only because of his arrogance decided to mobilize armies and march like hundreds of thousands of troops and caused bloodshed literally for the next 300 years because he didn't like the response. So much, when you think about it, happens in the world. I think Trump still clings to power today because he can't let go. His ego is way too big. It's way too inflated. Saying, okay, fine, I lost. It's like, very difficult for him. I want you to imagine how much in history, how much evil in history took place because of arrogance, and because people responded to arrogant behavior with arrogant behavior. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, knowing this ayah, all too well, when he came to the city of Mecca in year 9, during the Fath, during the conquest, what did he do? Did he treat the arrogant people of Mecca with arrogance?
No.
It was the exact opposite. He enters the city riding his horse and he lowers his head. Whereas, other victorious conquerors enter like that. But the Prophet ﷺ wanted to, show that humility as he entered in order to comply. But that was his nature. Now, he's not complying with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was his nature to be humble, right? And as we expect from any of the Hameems, there is a mention of Bani Israel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Hebrews in this surah. And since this is a surah about arrogance or about the treatment of arrogance, we expect and we predict that the component of the story of the Hebrews would serve our theme. Right? Let's investigate. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again exposes us to the second group here of people who have committed arrogance. And look at ayah number 16. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحُكْمَ وَالنُّبُوَّةَ وَرَزَقْنَاهُم مِّنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. God basically says that we've granted the Hebrews the scriptures, wisdom, prophethood, we've given them in sustenance, and we have favored them over all of their contemporaries. Al-Alameen, people that lived in their time, because they was the only monotheistic group. Okay? So far, so good. Right? Awesome. Again, the privilege was given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not by their own actions. But look at ayah number 17. وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ بَيِّنَاتٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْرِ. Everything was clarified to them. The path was clear. What is it that they needed to do? And here's the kicker. فَمَا اخْتَلَفُوا إِلَّا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. فَمَا اخْتَلَفُوا إِلَّا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. They only started developing divergent views, and disunity was sown in their community only after they've received the right amount of knowledge. Whoa. Isn't it supposed to be the other way around?
It is.
Like it's supposed to be because of my ignorance that I am doing something wrong. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that precisely because of their knowledge that they did something wrong. What does that mean?
Arrogance.
Where does the arrogance come from? And what causes the arrogance? Say again? Pride? Absolutely. And the pride comes from what? It comes from the knowledge. Here's another source of pride, another source of arrogance. I call this, spiritual supremacy. People who belong to one faith, they think that everyone else is wrong, that everyone else is inferior. They think that they have this monopoly over the truth. It is okay for you to feel that Islam is the truth, and you put your head on your pillow comfortably at night. But it is not okay to think that everyone else is inferior to you. It is not okay to look down upon other people. As the Quran taught us, كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلُ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. This is how you were if it wasn't for God's blessings. And so, spiritual supremacy is, I think, one of the evils of our world today. And spiritual supremacy leads to other lesser forms of supremacy. So that in the Muslim community we have madhab supremacy now, right? So there is the Sunni supremacy, there's the Shia supremacy. The Shias, many of them, they consider that the Sunnis to be inferior. They use the word Nasibiyya, right? As if like all Sunnis are somehow supporters of the Umayyads and they were okay with the slaughter that was exacted by Muawiyah. Absolutely not true. But again, these generalizations are wrong. And then you have the Sunnis, they call the Shias the Rafidah, the rejectionists, right? And then within the Sunnis, we have the Hanafis. Come on, Hanafis, we're the best. We are the most supreme of all the madhabs. Everyone else is like, Malikis, that's okay, I'll let you guys exist, but you have to understand that we are the most awesome of all the madhabs, kind of thing. And that goes into even the intellectual movements, right? Who may all be Hanafi, but they're still fighting with each other, right? So you have the Diyubandis and Ahlul Hadith, and you have the Barelvis, and you have the Ikhwanis, and what is that? And the Tablighis, just to throw another wrench, into the mix. Say again?
They call Sunni Awadi Kafir.
Really? I'm pretty sure some people do.
That was 7 years ago.
I'm pretty sure you lived there, so you would know. I'm pretty sure some people do.
You Sunni or you say you Kafir or?
Are you a Shia or Kafir?
Yeah.
I've heard that before. And so sometimes knowledge is the source of your arrogance. As long as you have little knowledge, you're trying to pursue knowledge, you're trying to learn, you're humble, you come to the masjid, you ask questions, you're taking it easy. But the more you develop knowledge,
you have your own opinion.
I have my own opinion now. Right? Hey, wait. I don't remember last time I went to the Imam to ask that question. I kind of figured it out all by myself. Oh, wait. Some of the brothers come to me after Jumu'ah and they ask me questions. And they ask me to make dua for them. What? And so, فَمَا اخْتَلَفُوا إِلَّا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. The strife started when they felt a sense of supremacy as a result of the knowledge that was given to them. So subhanAllah, see all these different avenues to arrogance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps discussing with us, right? And then we come to the third group that was deluded with arrogance. Look at ayah number 21. أم حسب الذين اجترحوا السيئات أن نجعلهم كالذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سواء محياهم ومماتهم. Those who have constantly committed sins, they think that we will equate them with the righteous who have believed and have done the good deeds. Where does that come from? It comes from, this notion today that I hear a lot. You have especially some younger people who would say, I'm spiritual, I'm close to God, I don't need to pray. Do I need to pray? I don't need to pray. God doesn't need my prayer. Have you heard that before?
Oh yeah.
God doesn't need my prayer, right? Or they would develop a tremendous amount of academic awareness or academic knowledge of Islam, but when it comes to the practices of Islam, they feel like, I'm higher than that. And then they will challenge you. They will look you straight in the eye. And they will say, what, are you saying that God is not merciful? Are you saying that God is just, like he wants to throw people in hellfire? God is all loving. I'm sure I have space in God's kingdom, whether I'm righteous or unrighteous. Which, again, is such a Christian idea. It's such a Christian idea. For better or worse, it's a very Christian idea. And the Christian idea is, Jesus died on the cross so that we're all saved. But the consequence, I think, of that is that human efforts to achieve salvation become like a moot point. It becomes like a redundancy. I was once giving a talk at the Lutheran Church in Davis, and Lutherans, just like Catholics, maybe even a little bit more than Catholics, they emphasize. I think Protestants in general. That's one of the main reasons of the rift, between Martin Luther and the Catholic Church, is that the Catholic Church believed in the indulgences. They believed there are things that the human can do that would help us achieve salvation. Whereas Martin Luther's argument was what? There is absolutely nothing you can do. Your deeds don't matter whatsoever. The only thing that matters for salvation is to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. So Martin Luther and the Protestants, and of course, the Lutheran Church was the very organized group of Protestants that came to existence after Martin Luther. They emphasized the idea that deeds do not matter. The only thing that matters is that you have to accept Jesus as your Savior. And so, in my talk, there was a question and answer session, and so someone asked me a question, and then I responded with a question. I said, in Christian theology, in Lutheran theology, deeds don't matter, right? So he said, well, theoretically they don't, but we still want to emphasize good deeds as a way of showing gratitude to God. So I said, let's say that I'm a jerk, and I don't want to show gratitude to God, but I've accepted Jesus Christ as a Savior. Will God still accept me or not? He said, well, it would be just like completely inappropriate. I said, I just asked you a very simple question.
Yes or no?
And he said, yes or no? He said, no, God will accept you. So I said, imagine a human society that is made of people who do not believe in personal responsibility, who do not believe in good deeds, who do not believe that I'm accountable and I need to put effort in order to secure my own salvation. Yes, I understand that my effort is almost nearly negligible compared to the magnanimous reward that awaits me in the afterlife. Whatever 5 daily prayers and some charity and whatever can never be a proper effort to earn you Jannah, right? Nonetheless, it's still necessary to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're trying, right? And I think that, again, this notion is really important, because there's a lot of people in the Muslim community today that continue to retain a component of that Christian theology and continue to believe that actions don't matter as long as my heart is in the right place. I believe in God and I love Rasulullah. I love the Prophet so much. What's that? Yes, exactly. See what the brother said? Aqidah Shafa'at. You know, my faith, my belief is what's going to help me on the day of judgment, what's going to intercede on my behalf. And these are erroneous ideas, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dispels that stereotype. You cannot rely on your education, you cannot rely on your good heart, you cannot rely on all of these things. You know, that's just another source of arrogance. You have to surrender. It is God that said, do these things. It's not up to you. You know, you don't make it up on your own. Fourth group of people who lost their way because of arrogance are detailed in ayah number 23. أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه وأضله الله على علم وختم على سمعه وقلبه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about people who follow their hawa. What is hawa?
Your whim.
Hawa is whim. People who follow their whims. There are those who follow rules. There are those who follow laws. There are those who follow unchangeable paradigms. And then there are those who follow however they feel in the morning. Which one you think will lead a happier life?
Your whim.
I mean, again, if happiness is defined by instant gratification, then yeah, maybe the second guy will be always instantly gratified because whatever they see something, oh, I want that. And it's like little children. You take them with you to the grocery store in order to do some groceries. They want this and they want this and they want that. And they're not even patient for you to even discuss with them, you know, whether they should buy this item or not. If their eyes landed on another item, they're gonna desire that. And if their eyes landed on a third item, they're gonna desire that. And today I hear this a lot. You know, why do you have to do this? Because it makes me happy. Have you heard that before?
Many times.
That is as if that is enough of an excuse. That is enough of, you know, كُلَّمَا جُعْتَ أَكَلْتَ, you know, Hassan Basri used to say. Every time you feel hungry, you eat. كُلَّمَا عَطِشْتَ شَرِبْتَ. Every time you feel thirsty, you drink. Like, are you serious? Like, classical scholars look so down upon the idea of the instant fulfillment of desire. Why? Because sometimes the desire may give you instant happiness, but it is not necessarily good for you. And I think philosophically, all of us understand that. It's just the idea to bring ourselves to take action is really what's difficult. So when you follow a paradigm consistently, sometimes you're in the mood, you do your prayer. Sometimes you're not in the mood, you still do your prayer. But if your prayer depends on your mood, then one day you'll pray, the other day you won't pray. If going to work depends on your mood, I have a great boss, really understanding, work environment is so cool, my office has a big window, and the break room has lots of donuts. So you start you love going to work. I love going to work. And when the circumstances change at work, I hate going to work. Should you stop going to work because you hate going to work? Or who's going to feed the kids? There is value to consistency. And when you're consistent, right, you live a happy and stable life. Yes, it has ups and downs, but your curve is always going like this, right? But people who follow their whims, they keep changing every single day depending on how they feel. And how they feel is determined by the environment, is determined by how many hours they slept yesterday, is determined by whether or not husband or wife had an argument in the morning, is determined by, the spent an hour and a half on Facebook yesterday, right? It depends on a million circumstances, much of which you cannot control. So your life keeps flopping up and down, right and left every single day. That is absolutely horrendous. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls hawa an idol that people want to worship. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. Like an astonished statement. Have you seen those people who treat their whims as if they're gods, as if they're idols that they worship? It makes me happy. I do this because why do you want to take away something that makes me happy? Because it is better for you, you idiot, right? And we do that with our kids all the time. You can't eat that right now. Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you need to finish your homework. Do you think that kids are happy because they're working on their math until like 11 p.m.? They're not happy. But in the long term, what does that do? So ayah number 23 again details another group of people that basically act arrogantly, in the sense that they put their passions and they put their whims and they put their desires before the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What matters is to make myself happy. It doesn't matter to make my parents happy. It doesn't matter to make my brothers and sisters happy, or my community, or my friends. It doesn't matter to make God happy. What matters is that I make myself happy, because I'm more important than all of them. And then we come to the most impactful statement in the surah, ayah number 28. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes a scene on the Day of Judgment, and He says that nations will receive their books. Every single human being on the Day of Judgment will receive a book, a writ. And in that book, all of your good deeds and bad deeds are documented, right? And so the manner by which you will receive your book, you will be what? Standing, sitting, sleeping?
On your knees.
You'll be on your knees. Jathiyah. Meaning you are on your knees when you receive those books. وَتَرَى كُلَّ أُمَّةٍ جَاثِيَةٍ. Subhanallah. It's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you in that position. Now, who's arrogant today? He forces you to humble yourself on that day. And there's absolutely nothing you can do or say about it. كُلُّ أُمَّةٍ تُدْعَى إِلَى كِتَابِهَا. All the nations and the people, they will be called upon to receive their books. One of my teachers actually used to say that because the Day of Judgment exists beyond the realm of this universe, that space and time, as we know them in the universe, will cease to exist, right? And because time ceases to exist, actually, if you do some research on the internet, they say that time, just like the universe, will come to an end in about 5 billion years. The universe has been around for 13 billion years. So when you think about it, we're actually towards the end, of the universe. 5 billion years, thankfully, is still a lot of time. Alhamdulillah. None of us will be around when that happens. But the point is, time ceases to exist. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you're going to sit on your knees and I will run this reel, the reel as in like a film reel, that has your entire life. But it's playing backwards. So you're able to trace, the moment of your death backwards all the way to your childhood. You'll be able to see every single thing that you've done, every place that you've been to, every word that you've ever articulated, every statement that you've ever uttered, every single second, fraction of a second in your life, it'll play in front of your own eyes, and you're sitting there in shock, in astonishment, because we do forget. The power of man to forget everything. It is absolutely incredible. Like sometimes, Google Photos or Facebook reminds you of pictures from like a couple of years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. That the way you react, oh my God, I had completely forgotten about that. Oh my God. Like, you remember that you've traveled to this place and you've eaten that food and you've met those people, right? And you've completely lost track. Or you see a little item at home, like a little keychain or something that belongs to your grandmother that you've had like 20 years ago, and we have this absolute power to forget. We forget people that we hurt. We forget people that we humiliate. We forget debts. Go home right now and look around your house. You will likely find something that belongs to somebody else. It could be like a janamaz. It could be like a little prayer rug. It could be a book. It could be something, but I guarantee you, every single one of us owes somebody else something. It could be money. It could be whatever. I advise you to go home because you've forgotten. you know, a Muslim needs to, especially when it comes to money, by the way, you have to be absolutely 100% vigilant. If you owe someone money, write it down, give yourself 75 reminders so that you pay that person back. It will be used against you on the day of judgment. I remember one of the brothers, lend me a book. It was a book about Palestine, actually. It was a great book. And I put it in my library, and I completely forgot about it. And so he contacted me, and like 2.5 years later. And he said, I'm so sorry, I just, I know you probably benefit from that book more than me, and probably inspired talks and khutbahs. But, I think I want to read it again. Will you please be willing to give me the book? I was like, what book? He said, the book I gave you, like when I came to your house, a couple of years ago. I was like, you came to my house a couple of years ago? I invited you to my house, what? He says, yes, it's the book, that was about this and that. And wallahi, 2.5 days, I'm looking for this book right and left, and I'm losing my mind. And I couldn't find it, so I ordered it for him, on Amazon again. And then I sent it to him, and then a week later, I actually found the book in a box, in my office. But yeah, I would lose sleep if I have an item. And I'm saying this right now, and I probably have stuff in my home that belongs to somebody else that I've forgotten about. Because the power of the human mind to forget is absolutely astounding. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the day of judgment, asks you to sit on your knees, and then He will basically run this entire film of your life backwards. So you're able to trace everything and feel that God's ruling upon you is just and justified. All right? Last two ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ayat 36 and 37, فَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدُ رَبِّ السَّمَوَاتِ وَرَبِّ الْأَرْضِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. All the praise is due to God, the Lord of heavens, the Lord of earth, and the Lord of the worlds. وَلَهُ الْكِبْرِيَاءُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Glory belongs to God as He establishes Himself in heaven and establishes Himself in earth, and He alone is almighty and truly wise. See, a surah that is about kibr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends it by basically saying, the only one who's justified to even feel it is myself. Is myself. But the interesting thing is that He doesn't say, glory belongs to me. What does He say here? He uses the third person.
Mm-hmm.
Why does He use the third person? Why doesn't He say, kibriya belongs to me, glory, grandeur, it belongs to me. He says,
to Him.
Glory and grandeur belongs to Him, God, with a capital H. Who's reciting this at the end of the day?
Us.
He wants us to say it. He wants you to say it. He wants you to say it in your moments of arrogance and ego. He wants you to say, oh, the kibriya belongs to Allah. وَلَهُ الْكِبْرِيَا. It doesn't belong to me, it belongs to Him. But if He says it, then, of course He says it. He can say it all the time. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts it in the third person to compel us to say it so that we continue to be reminded. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with inspiration from the book. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us under the shade of the Quran,
Ameen.
to make us among those who observe and follow. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us understand the Quran, its boundaries, its rulings, its teachings, its spirituality, its stories, its history. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the companions of the book in this dunya and those who enter Jannah with it on the day of judgment. Allahumma ameen. Inshallah, we plan to pray Isha around 8:30, so I can take some questions if you guys have any. We also have some tea and refreshments over there on your way out, inshallah, if you guys would like to take some. Any questions about tonight's surah or anything else?
it's a comment, maybe a question. You can elaborate more on. Kibriya or feeling of superiority or majesty or whatever, for materialistic reasons or knowledge or whatever comes, actually ultimately ends killing the human agency and hurting the beneficial aspects of any human agency.
The brother is saying that arrogance ends up killing your agency, your ability to determine your choices, your ability to make the right decisions,
Ability
yeah,
to learn.
and your ability to learn. And I think I do agree with that statement because arrogant people are very difficult to teach. They're very difficult to educate. They're very difficult to communicate with. They're very difficult to converse with. And so they become resistant to growth. Number one, they are not gaining anything because they think that they already have it. Right? I don't need to learn anything. I'm awesome. But at the same time, it basically makes it difficult for other people to help them, even when they need help. So I definitely agree with that statement. The only one that is self-sufficient is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rest of us, we need each other, and we need each other's help. Every single day we learn, every single day we grow. You might think that when you come here, you're learning from me, but quite honestly, and I've said this before, the greatest beneficiary of Tafseerah is myself, because I am in a position to increase my own knowledge and learn and grow as I prepare every single time I come here. So arrogance definitely stands as a barrier between you and achieving that goal. Any questions? Any comments? Yes.
Just a quick question. At what point does conviction and arrogance, for example, if I believe in something with conviction, and I think that I'm right, and I'm talking to the other guy, and he is, not making a point, it's more, which is nearer to like Islamic understanding. At what point my conviction becomes my arrogance?
It's a good question. I guess, see, everyone is aware of their own heart. Everyone understands themselves best, and so it's not up to me to say. So you and I disagree on a matter. You hold a certain view, and I hold a different view, and then we will discuss it. Number one, we have to come to that conversation with open hearts, with a desire to actually learn. And number two, if something compelling is mentioned, I have to acknowledge it. Number three, if the evidence, has been established, I need to compel myself to actually follow, right? And so the extent of what I can do to you in that conversation is to just bring it up. The acknowledgement and the compliance will have to be done by you. So we will have our conversation and I will leave. And then it's just going to be between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have to sincerely ask yourself, number one, was that really a good point, or did that make any sense? Or maybe there's a shred of truth in it. I'm going to go do my own research. I will go online. I will ask somebody else. I will really verify. Now, if it occurs to you, if you dismiss it right away, just because it's coming from somebody else, then that's probably arrogance. But if you dismiss it later, after doing multiple research on the subject, and it only affirmed your original position, then that is likely just the right conviction. Does that make sense? But much of that, sort of like conceptual process is only yours. It's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't see it, and none of us has any control over it. Any other questions?
It's actually one way of identifying that thing is a feeling in the heart.
Of identifying what?
Of identifying that you are from a clean discussion and ideas exchange or fighting ideas to the arrogance. There is a feeling that you have in your heart.
Absolutely. I know exactly what Brother Hisham is saying here. So what he's saying, that there is that feeling that you have. Arrogance has this tick. It comes with a tick. It comes with a scratch. Okay? And I think the righteous and the unrighteous will feel it, because every human being has their ego. Okay? So the question is not whether or not I felt it or I did not feel it. So it's that feeling that you're being offended, that feelings of arrogance, this controlled rage, right? That feeling of humiliation, that feeling like, that person knows better than me. I think everyone will feel it. Even the most righteous will feel that. Okay. The question is not how you feel. The question is whether or not you're ready to act.
What you do about it.
What you do about it is what really matters. And so quite often, I give the khutbah. And it used to happen back in the day a lot more frequently than the last few years. I think it's just because I was, much younger and I was a lot more immature. I think I'm still a little bit immature, but I used to be a lot more immature like 10 years ago. And so when people bring me, certain feedback, it's much easier to get positive feedback and praise. Oh, Jazakallah khair, it was so awesome today. I was crying the whole time. And then you feel good about yourself. But when someone comes to you and makes a huge disagreement. I was once giving a khutbah at Salam about Surah al-Kahf. And this brother came out of the woodworks, came out of nowhere, and he was so attacking me so vehemently. And he was like, all the hadith about reading Surah al-Kahf on Fridays are all weak. Are you serious? Where'd you get that? It's in Tirmidhi, it's in Bukhari, it's in the greatest books. What are you talking about? He said, no, they're all weak, they cannot be dismissed. You are misguiding the community. There's that moment when your ego makes you feel like you want to punch someone in the face. That moment? You're so Jazakallah khair, brother. I will make sure, inshallah, that I look into that. Here's my number. If you have links or something, just please share it with me. I would want to know if I'm saying something wrong to the community. So I really appreciate your feedback, but I cannot even describe to you how angry I was. And I wasn't angry. I was angry, obviously, because my ego was pushed to the limit a little bit. But I was also angry because I know how wrong he is, and how, well, I don't want to say arrogant, how confident he was. He was so confident, like it was the absolute truth. I was like, man, come on, at least come at it with you can question it. You can, Imam, are those ahadith sound? Are those sahih? But don't make a statement like this when you don't know. So I felt it. I think everyone does feel it. We are programmed like this. The human heart, unfortunately, because of the way we live in this day and age, our hearts are programmed that the criticism and disparagement of people makes us feel bad, and the praise and validation of people makes us feel good. And that's why people don't want to disagree with each other anymore. There's this whole culture, or it's become either or. It's either, oh, you're my friend, you have to be supportive, therefore you need to accept everything I do, or there's the cancel culture. A couple of days ago, Obama tweeted about the whole thing with defunding the police. So he said, people say these snappy things that will only just stir others, such as defund the police.
Not the slogan.
He was talking about the slogans. And I follow this particular activist, African American activist, who I really appreciate and admire. And this person, it was a barrage of criticism to Obama. A barrage of criticism. What did the man say? What did the man say? He's not even saying defunding the police is wrong. He's saying that we have to be careful with the slogans that we use because we end up losing people that could have supported the cause. But cancel culture in America has become in such way that the minute there is a disagreement with anyone or there is any criticism, that person is cut off completely from your life. You will unfriend them, you will block them, you will never ever see them again. You see them on the street, you don't say salam to them. And everyone around you needs to always validate you and say you're awesome, you're so good. You post like the weirdest picture, like someone just woke up and they're asleep in their eyes and they take a selfie. All of their friends on social media, they're supposed to just say, oh, you look so gorgeous this morning. Like no one is able to even share an honest opinion any longer. And I think there's a tremendous amount of arrogance involved with that. There's definitely a tremendous amount of arrogance. So just to conclude the rant, make sure that you do share feedback with people, but find the most loving and compassionate ways to share that feedback. We still need to give advice to each other, and we still need to give feedback to each other, and we have to learn how to have the open heart, curb our ego, take the feedback, and hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, that we act upon it.
The comment on the surah in general.
Yes.
Obviously, the theme is arrogance and all the evil things related to arrogance. Some examples of, characters and manners and things that will lead absolutely to arrogance or is inherently as a result of the arrogance. I think the surah is also telling us to work on ourselves so that we do not reach that level of arrogance, to be far away from arrogance.
As possible. Yeah, to be far away from it as possible, so that you don't have to go through the struggles of overcoming it in the first place. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's better. Preventive medicine is always better, right? I do agree with that 100%.
And the medicine for that is to always relate to the last part of the surah, which is everything to Him.
Yes.
And you keep reminding
Glory
yourself,
belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
reminding yourself that that's it.
It's incredible, how that theme recurs all over the surahs of the Quran for the last 5 years. Attribute all of it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is just the greatest solution. It is the only medicine. We have 4 minutes, inshallah, before we pray Isha. So, jazakumullah khairan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر ان الانسان في خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Thank you so much, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, we're going to pray Isha in 4 minutes. So please get ready and I'm forward.
جزاكم الله خيرا.
The